Let's analyze Samsung Electronics' performance for the second quarter of 2024. Of course, it is not an investment recommendation. 3 key questions we are addressing here. First, what was the last quarter's performance of SEC? SEC is, by the way, Samsung Electronics? Second, will SEC's sharp price decline continue? Lastly, who is driving this stock? In the second quarter of 2024, revenue reached 74 trillion Korean won, marking a 23% increase compared to the second quarter of 2023. It has been continuously rising over the past 4 quarters. However, when looking at the quarterly performance over the past 4 years, it is -4% lower compared to the same period 2 years ago. Looking at quarterly revenue performance over the span of about 8 years, we can still say that the overall trend is upward. It is natural for a growing company to experience rising revenue. The difference is even more pronounced when looking at operating income. In the second quarter of 2024, operating income is at around 10 trillion Korean won. In comparison to the second quarter of 2023, it has increased approximately 13.9 times. This significant increase can be attributed to the poor performance in the second quarter of 2023. However, when considering the quarterly operating income over the past 8 years, we can say that the performance in the second quarter of 2024 is approximately at the average level. In fact, it indicates that the operating income in 2023 was quite poor. A similar trend is observed in net income as well. In the second quarter of 2024, net income seems to have returned to average levels. However, it's worth noting that the first half of 2023 was particularly poor. One notable point is the sharp increase in net income in the fourth quarter of 2022, which appears to be somewhat of an optical illusion. This surge seems to have resulted from the accounting for various non-operating gains, such as asset sales and mergers and acquisitions, all being recorded in the fourth quarter of 2022. Since this is not directly related to today's topic, we will move on. Let's examine the stock price in relation to performance. I calculated the average quarterly stock price over the past 2 years, and we can see that it has consistently risen until the previous quarter. This seems to be an unusual phenomenon, especially considering that the performance in 2023 was quite poor. There was a notable divergence between performance and stock price. While performance declined, the stock price increased. Of course, performance is not the sole factor influencing stock prices, but we can say that the movements were contrary to expectations based on performance. As of the end of September, we will examine how much Samsung Electronics' stock price has fallen. The average stock price over the past 2 years is 68,600 Korean won, and it is currently at a lower level than this. Compared to the average stock price over the past 8 years, current prices are still higher, but they are approaching that average rapidly. I briefly compared them with the average stock price, and after examining recent stock decline issues, I will also discuss the fair value of Samsung Electronics. The reasons for the recent decline in Samsung Electronics, in my view, are as follows. First, there are worries that there may already be an oversupply of HBM in the memory semiconductor sector, which has been widely reported in the media. Second, there are concerns that the U.S. export restrictions on China could negatively affect Samsung's relationships with its Chinese customers. Third, there are fears that the economic recession will lead to a general decline in performance across Samsung's non-semiconductor divisions. Fourth, there are apprehensions regarding the lack of long-term competitiveness in the semiconductor sector. Lastly, unlike during the tenure of former chairman Lee Kun-hee, there are concerns about whether Samsung can achieve management reform under the current leadership of Lee Jae-yong, given the different social atmosphere and personal style. The most important question is always, what is the appropriate value for Samsung Electronics? We would like to discuss the value considering the performance results. The most important indicator is probably the PER. We calculated the rolling PER based on the previous 4 quarters by dividing the market capitalization by the earnings. Currently, the PER is 12.8, which shows a recent decline. Interestingly, while the performance in 2023 was very poor, the PER for 2024 has soared. This suggests that despite the poor earnings, the stock price did not drop, leading to a situation where the first and second quarters of 2024 were overvalued. When looking at the average PER over the past 2 years, we can see that the current PER is approaching the average level for that period. When looking at the average PER over the past 8 years, it is around 11.6, and the current PER is somewhat higher than this level. This suggests that there may still be room for further declines in the stock price. On the other hand, the price-to-book ratio or PBR is typically a useful metric for financial institutions or capital-intensive companies. While Samsung Electronics engages in both B2B and B2C operations, it still involves large-scale investments and possesses significant assets, which makes calculating PBR a valuable supplementary indicator. It can be observed that the current PBR is approximately -1 sigma lower than the average PBR over the past 8 years. Here, sigma refers to the standard deviation, indicating that the drop is statistically significant. This suggests that the stock is trading at a notably lower valuation compared to its historical average, which could imply potential undervaluation. On the supply and demand side, Samsung Electronics' stock price is significantly influenced by foreign investors. An analysis of the stock price and foreign ownership percentage over the past 30 months reveals a high correlation coefficient of 0.90, indicating a strong relationship between the two. This suggests that movements in foreign ownership tend to closely track changes in the stock price. Among large listed companies in South Korea, Samsung Electronics ranks in the top 22 for the size of the correlation coefficient regarding foreign ownership. In the graph, companies at the top exhibit a positive correlation between foreign ownership and stock price, while some companies at the bottom show an inverse relationship, where stock prices move contrary to foreign investor activity. This indicates varying degrees of sensitivity to foreign investment trends among different firms. Recently, the correlation coefficient has increased significantly. Calculating the same metric over the past 30 days shows that the correlation coefficient has risen to 0.92. This indicates that foreign investors have clearly driven the stock price movements of Samsung Electronics during this period. The overall ranking has significantly risen from 24th over the past 30 months to 12th based on the last 30 days. In conclusion, we will interpret how these changes in correlation and ranking relate to Samsung's overall market dynamics and investor sentiment. First, it can be said that earnings have recovered to average levels. Based on PER, the current stock price may still be overvalued. However, according to the supporting indicator PBR, it appears undervalued. Samsung Electronics has traditionally been a stock driven by foreign investors, and this trend seems to have intensified. Therefore, for Samsung's stock price to recover, it is crucial to restore expectations for both Samsung Electronics and the South Korean economy from a foreign perspective. This concludes today's video. This is the first video prepared by our quarterly performance team. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.